Hi, Carl Munger with Gallant Few here. It's my honor today to bring Thomas Nimmo onto the show. Thomas is co-founder of a company called Cyberfense, and he served in the 1st Ranger Battalion back in the dark ages, I think probably Black Beret time frame. Is that right, Thomas?
That's correct.
Hey, welcome to the New American Veteran. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for inviting us and give us an opportunity.
Hey, tell me a little bit about your military background. You served in the 1st Ranger Battalion, and then how do you go from, and this is the whole point of this show is, how do you go from being an enlisted guy in the 1st Ranger Battalion to being co-founder of a cybersecurity company? And then after we talk about that real quick, then we'll go into what your company does and how other folks that are out there, whether they're veterans that own a small business or maybe are looking to be part of this industry, and talk about how that's important to them. So tell me a little about your military background.
Well, I started off, not really planning to go to the Ranger Regiment. Like most guys, I joined up as enlisted, and I had airborne school guaranteed, an 11X. The Ranger Regiment came to airborne school and asked for tryouts, whatever that was, and I just happened to pass all the criteria and wound up in RIP, and then landed in the 1st Ranger Battalion, luckily. Nice. It was my great fortune. I spent over 4 years there, went to scuba school, and had all the fun that a Ranger could have, and I was prepared to leave after my 1st extension for my enlistment. And I went into university after that. My degree is in Latin and Greek. I thought I would be a professor, but wound up in syndicate finance for one of the nation's largest banks, which was a very interesting experience. Most of my clients happened to be technology-based when the internet just started up. And so I got a good taste of how internet businesses ought to be run, and the tempo of operations, and learned technology along the way as well as financing it. So I learned the risk.
Your initial education on the cybersecurity side was on the job training.
Exactly. It was really in risk management, seeing if the business model was sound enough to be paid back. And so that was actually a good foundation for what we're trying to attempt now with a startup company. I left banking and went straight into technical and risk consulting. And after about 8 years of that, I moved to France with my wife, and I found a team of experts in artificial intelligence and software applications, and we formed a team, and here we are today.
There's probably a bunch of jokes you can make about France and artificial intelligence, but we won't go down that path. It's a huge leap. It's quite a jump for somebody to say, hey, I'm going to jump out. I'm going to co-found my own business. How risky is that? How scary is that to take that step?
You know, it can be absolutely frightening, even to myself on certain days. One, there's an opportunity cost, and if you're going to abandon your daily life for a pursuit, and so you have to think about the opportunity cost, which is, what are you going to lose? Is it full-time salary for X number of years? Thankfully, I prepared myself with a safety net, so I had that luxury. A lot of people don't, and so they have to work extra hours or at night or on the weekends to, pursue their dream or build whatever they're going to. So in that respect, I'm quite fortunate. And the opportunity cost has been high. It's been a few years that we formed this startup and built it to where it is now.
When going into the cybersecurity side, most of my experience, maybe a lot of people that are listening to this, their experience is they have Norton antivirus on their computer, or some other thing that they've downloaded, and maybe even a small business owner that only has himself or a couple of other employees they really don't think very much about the potential for somebody to hack into their account or into their computer. Can you talk about the risks for that? What's out there, and what does somebody like me need to worry about?
Yeah, that's a good question, because in the 90s, when consumers were really allowed to start engaging on the internet, the tools and the interfaces, we look back at today, were pretty primitive. They look like almost like an Atari game console. But now, even then, there are quite a few dangers, and one would generally say, in a general sense, hacking. That has evolved. One, we're storing a lot more information, personal information that people can steal and monetize. And the tools that we use, even though they're sophisticated, they do have bugs and glitches and backdoors that are undiscovered, that people who have technically or generally all day to mine these holes will find them and steal the information or change the information, whatever their mission is. So you really need to protect yourself as a homeowner, as a regular consumer. You want to keep all of your updates running. Make sure all of your software versions are up to date. Make sure your passwords are strong. Just some of the basic practices. You have to remain consistent and very vigilant. You have to be very, very careful. Please be careful on things you click, because if you click on the wrong things, like an ad for free pizza or free anything, that could actually release malware. And that malware can infect your computer, take over your computer when you're not using it. It can do some very nasty things. So people have to be very cognizant and train themselves about what they click on. So those are the things I would say for the everyday user. For a small business owner, just think of all those things and put an order of magnitude onto that, because now your business is at stake. And if you have employees, you need to train them properly on not clicking on certain things on ads or emails that might come to them, because your business is at stake. And one of the trending attacks is actually called ransomware. And it is exactly what it sounds. If someone clicks on a malware link, that they'll actually accept malware into your network, and it could actually take over your entire network, and you'll get a message saying if you want your files back or you want control of your computer or network, you'll have to pay a certain amount in Bitcoin. And just in hostage situations, it's not necessarily the case that the hostage takers will return your files, even if you pay. So the best practices are to update your antivirus, be aware and train yourself, get some training on malware and trending attacks, and then also back up your files.
So tell me now about your company, Cyberfense. What does Cyberfense do?
Well, we came down to this concept actually by being regular consultants. We helped small, large companies with their security audits. We're really in the infancy about 3 or 4 years ago. And we were actually overwhelmed by the work. And we thought there's got to be a better way to make it a repeatable process, a scalable process. And once we made a prototype that worked for us to actually free us up a little bit, our hours. Some small companies were actually interested, but they couldn't really afford what the cost of an assessment. And when you go to a security firm or an accounting firm, an assessment can cost, depending on the size of your company, anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. And at the end of this process, it takes a couple weeks of interviews and consultants visiting your business. At the end, you get a static report for $5,000 to $15,000 in detail, telling you, how poorly you perform, against standards and other requirements, security requirements that are out there. And then it would take another $10,000 to fix those, which the consultants would gladly do. So your costs rack up, very, very quickly. And
Yeah.
so what we've done, we've simplified the process, made it repeatable and scalable, and actually crushed the price down to where small and medium-sized companies can afford it. There was a great report out last year from Price Waterhouse that 77% of all U.S. companies, and there actually happen to be about 5.4 million companies out there in the United States, have not taken a risk assessment. That's a lot of companies that could be vulnerable. And so the barrier is really cost. And so we think we've cracked the code on making an assessment that's cost effective, that's easy enough for an executive to start and maybe one of his more technically savvy managers to complete, and then to get comparable output as if they were engaging a security firm.
You sent me a note earlier with some things to talk about, and in here you talked about, or you mentioned some of the trending attacks: ZeroDay, data leakage, malware. Can you talk through what's ZeroDay?
Yeah, these are some of the biggest things to really watch out for. ZeroDay happens once a month, and it's usually at the first of the month. And this is when all the software application companies over the previous month or 30 days, they have scanned their software, their code, and they found bugs, or bugs were reported, and they have patches. And so when those patches come out on, let's say, the 1st of May, the first day of each month, they're put out online. Now, you as a business owner, you have sales meetings, you have payroll to worry about. The last thing you're going to probably look at midnight is the latest software patch. And so you want to know what's in those software patches. So the criminal element really wants to take advantage of that, let's say, arbitrage of time from the moment the patch goes out to the point of where most people will actually test it and install it. And so that could be 1 to 15 to even 30 days. So if you don't maintain your patches, you have a spread of time that's a huge vulnerability that you're not aware of. And so that's why you want to make sure everything is up to date, and get the notifications for the critical updates, because on ZeroDay, which is usually the first of the month, these patches come out, and unfortunately most users are the last to know. And
you're not talking about a patch that's like an update to Norton. You're talking about an update to an operating system or to another program that you're in and out of all the time.
It could be that and everything, Carl. It could be an application that you use each and every day that may hold your credit card information, your email, your phone number, your address. It could also be an operating system like Microsoft or whatnot. So there's one day of the month that all these patches come out, and you have less time than others. So it's just being aware of those and constantly updating your system to try to stay ahead.
Is it good enough to do the keep me automatically updated thing, or do you need to go in every day and physically look to see if there's an update?
There are some updates that are pushed out that you actually have to manually do yourself. Like for Apple, for instance, there are a lot of automatic updates, and they notify you. There are some that once you're notified, you actually have to do a manual, click a manual mechanism, because some people they really don't want to update. They want to wait for a serious release to have some time to see if there are any bugs, or maybe they have an older computer that doesn't quite satisfy the requirements. So they often wait. And again, that is a decision to open up some vulnerabilities. So yeah, but to answer your question, automatic updates are useful. Keeps you updated.
Well, talk about what can Cyberfense do for a veteran company, for a veteran-owned business?
Well, for veteran-owned businesses, we are, of course, I'm a veteran, so we're veteran-owned and operated. It's a great source for small and medium-sized businesses who, for veterans who lack the cyber fluency to really come up to speed with what the requirements are now in business. Some people might have already encountered when they go to the bank, and if they're taking credit card transactions on their website, and they need a merchant services component. That is when someone uses your credit card on your website, there's a bank that has an interchange service. So they verify the credentials, they pass the money into their account and then into your account. When you go to apply for this merchant service, banks are now asking, are you secure? And they ask very specific questions about your security profile or disposition. And it takes time and money to complete that form. And if you don't have satisfactory answers, they will either not grant you preferred pricing or may not even grant you the service at all because they find you as a liability, as a vulnerability to their system. So that's very important to remember. And also if you're going for business insurance, insurance companies, of course, they would love to sell cyber insurance, but they also want to know, if you rely on computer systems or the internet for most of your business and you have disruption and that slows down your revenue, are you going to place a claim? And say they're starting to want to know more about your disposition on as far as security. For startups, we believe that our output is terrific for a founder to integrate into their pitch that they're secure, and they can tell very briefly how and why they're secure. Because what an investor doesn't want is to give a startup $10,000 or $100,000 that he expects them to use to grow their business, but instead 3 months down the road they have to pay for data breach notification or maybe even a lawsuit because they didn't take the adequate security measures.
So a veteran-owned business out there, if they want to reach out to you and say, hey, I want to talk about maybe engaging you with my company, where do they go? How do they find you? How do they contact you?
Well, first they go to cyberfense.com. They sign up for a free account. Again, the output from the free account is comparable to what you get from a security firm for a lot of money. And so we have made this offer, we're able to offer it free to the first level of members. We call them members, not subscribers, not users, because people own businesses. People are trying to struggle with cyber fluency. They're people. And so we call them members. And we treat our membership almost like a cyber health network, analogous to your HMO for your healthcare. We provide the diagnostics. We give you reach back to a professional, security professional that can answer questions. And if you're on the road to some sophistication or you have high risk, you can buy cyber insurance to cover you and help your business survive if there's a data breach. So it's a whole all-in-one platform.
I'll make sure and include this link to Cyberfense on the broadcast when it goes out. What if you're a veteran out there, maybe leaving active duty in a year, or you've been out for a year or so, and you've kind of thought about cybersecurity, what would you recommend that person do?
Well, first of all, we learn from, when we're in the field, before we go out on patrol, we want to know the enemy's disposition, and we want to understand our strengths and weaknesses and how that enemy can exploit those strengths and weaknesses. The first thing to do, the very first step, is for your company to take a cyber assessment. That is the first important step, because what that will do is it'll actually visually plot or represent your strengths and weaknesses. And your strengths you can leave alone at the time being, but your weaknesses, then you can identify those, prioritize those, and then use your limited resources in a methodical, smart way and attack those, creating your own risk roadmap, so to speak.
Sure. And, yeah. But what if I'm not a company, I'm just somebody that says I'm interested in maybe pursuing a career in this. what would you recommend that person do?
Well, certainly you have to have an interest in risk management and technical controls. And what I mean by technical controls are protections. You need to know something about encryption, how data is transmitted, stored, those types of things. If you have a good interest in those topics, I would start looking at some certifications. Start easy. CompTIA has some very good, I think there's a CompTIA Security Plus certification. It's a nominal charge. It gives you a well-rounded idea of the profession, and it's a good first-level achievement if you pass that exam. You can go to very sophisticated certifications like the CISSP, which is very well regarded in the workplace. You can look up the pay scales for that. I think now they're trending to $110,000 for a brand new minted CISSP. So they're in demand. There's a shortage of cybersecurity professionals out there. And certainly emphasize in cloud, because that's where everyone's going, is into the cloud.
Everything is, yeah. Thomas, thanks for being on the show today. I'd like to kind of let you have a minute here in closing, reflecting back on your transition as you've gone from being an Army Ranger to planning to teach Latin and Greek to owning your own business. What lessons would you pass on to somebody that's getting ready to leave active duty right now?
I would say take a really good look at your skills. Look to where you might want to go. Have sort of a plan for the first couple years, whether it's additional schooling, maybe some milestones, professional milestones you want to achieve. And be prepared. Be flexible for that to change. There's a lot of external forces out there that will bend you towards another direction, or it could be a new sentiment. I would just advise folks to be very, very open. Stay in touch with your military comrades and build a support group. And don't be afraid to quietly burnish your military skills and experience.
Nice. Well, Thomas, thanks for being on the show today.